The first person who ever saw me without my wig wasn't my fiancé. It wasn't my oncologist. It wasn't even my mother. It was a 7-year-old girl sitting beside me in the chemotherapy room. She looked at my bald head, smiled, took off her own pink baseball cap and whispered, "Now we match." Then she giggled. That little girl gave me more confidence in 10 seconds than my family had given me in 30 years. Her name was Lily. She died 4 months before my wedding. Every year since then, I still carry the tiny paper crane she folded for me during one of our treatments. It's in my jewelry box beside my wedding ring. Not because I enjoy remembering cancer, because I refuse to forget courage. My name is Claire Donovan. I was 30 years old when I married the only man who ever looked at me and saw a future instead of a diagnosis. But before I walked down that aisle, my own family tried to turn the worst chapter of my life into public entertainment. They thought ripping off my wig would ruin me. They had no idea they were about to destroy themselves. Instead, 2 years before the wedding, I found a lump while getting ready for work. I almost ignored it. I was busy. Everyone is busy. I promised myself I'd make a doctor's appointment after a project deadline. 3 weeks later, I finally did. Within 10 days, I heard 3 words that permanently divided my life into before and after. You have cancer. I don't remember much after that. I remember the doctor moving her lips. I remember nodding. I remember wondering why everyone else in the waiting room looked so normal. How could strangers keep discussing grocery lists while my entire future had just changed? Chemotherapy didn't hurt the way television makes people think. Not at first. What hurt was everything that disappeared afterward. Food tasted like metal. Walking upstairs became exhausting. Friends stopped calling because they didn't know what to say. Then one morning, I brushed my hair. Half of it stayed in the brush. The rest stayed in my hands. I sat on the bathroom floor for nearly an hour. Not because I believed hair made me beautiful. Because losing it made everything suddenly feel real. That afternoon, I shaved the rest. I wanted the choice to belong to me, not to cancer. My fiancé, Ethan Parker, came home carrying groceries. He found me standing in front of the bathroom mirror, completely bald. I couldn't even look at him. "I'm sorry," he frowned. "For what?" I pointed toward my head. "This," he walked over, placed both hands on my face, and kissed my forehead. "The woman I proposed to," he smiled, "is still standing right here." Then he disappeared into the garage. 5 minutes later, he came back holding electric clippers. "What are you doing?" He plugged them in. "If you're doing chemo," he smiled. "I'm doing solidarity." Before I could stop him, he shaved his own head. When he finished, he looked ridiculous. His head had 3 tiny scars I'd never noticed before. I laughed so hard I cried. He grinned. "See, we're both funny looking now." That was Ethan. He always found a way to make fear smaller. My parents reacted differently. Mom cried, not because I was sick, because she couldn't stop talking about the wedding. "What if your hair doesn't grow back?" I blinked. "I'm trying to survive." "I know, but wedding photos last forever." Dad stayed unusually quiet. My younger brother, Mason, wasn't quiet. He looked at my bald head once, then laughed. "So Wheeze, you'll save money on shampoo." Mom actually smiled. "Mazen." She shook her head while laughing. "You're terrible." Nobody told him to apologize. Nobody asked if I was okay. The joke simply became another family story. Another reminder that my pain existed mainly for someone else's entertainment. Against every expectation, treatment worked. By the following spring, my scans showed no active disease. My oncologist smiled. You've earned the right to start planning your future again. 3 weeks later, Ethan proposed all over again. Same man, different ring, different place. This time, he knelt in the hospital garden where we'd spent so many afternoons pretending not to be scared, I figured. He smiled. This place deserves a happier memory. I said yes. Before he finished asking. Wedding planning became surprisingly peaceful. Not because my family had changed, because Ethan quietly handled most of it. He hired vendors, met with photographers, tasted cakes, even chose flowers. He said, "You've spent enough time sitting in waiting rooms. Let me handle this." For months, everything felt hopeful. Until exactly 9 days before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off invitation updates. I wasn't supposed to hear them. Mom and Mason were sitting on the back patio. The kitchen window was open. Mason laughed. "I still can't believe she's wearing a wig." Mom answered without hesitation. "The groom deserves a real woman, not a bald ghost." Both of them laughed. I stood outside, holding a box of place cards. Neither of them knew I was there. I quietly turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't call Ethan. Instead, for the first time in my life, I made copies. Every text message, every voicemail, every cruel email, every hospital bill I'd secretly paid myself after my parents promised to help and never did. Every document, every receipt, every piece of truth, not because I wanted revenge, because something inside me finally whispered, "One day, you're going to need proof." I didn't know when, I didn't know why, but for the first time, I stopped collecting memories and started collecting evidence. The wedding morning arrived under a clear blue sky. The bridal suite buzzed with laughter. Music played softly in the background. My bridesmaids helped adjust my veil. I looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see cancer. I saw a bride. Then the dressing room door opened. Mason walked in carrying a gift box. "I've got a wedding present." He smiled. "So you'll always remember today." Something about his smile felt wrong. Very wrong. He walked behind me, placed both hands on my shoulders. Then, without warning, he grabbed my wig and ripped it off. The room exploded into screams. My veil fell beside it. My mother clapped once, then laughed. "The groom deserves a real woman, not a bald ghost." At that exact moment, the bridal suite door opened. Again, but it wasn't Ethan. It was someone none of us expected to see. My oncologist, Dr. Rebecca Sloan. She had come to deliver something. She insisted couldn't wait until after the ceremony. She stopped in the doorway, looked at my bald head, looked at my family, then quietly asked one question. "What exactly am I looking at, Doctor?" Rebecca Sloan didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The silence inside the bridal suite became almost unbearable. My wig was still lying on the polished floor. My veil had slipped beside it. No one bent down to pick either of them up. My mother slowly turned around. "Oh, I didn't realize we had another guest." "Doctor." Sloan didn't answer. She walked straight toward me. Her eyes quickly checked my face. My breathing, my posture. Years of treating cancer patients had made certain habits automatic. "Claire, are you all right?" I nodded. "I'm fine." She looked at my brother, then at my mother. Finally, she asked quietly who removed her wig. Maine shrugged. "I did. It was just a joke." "Doctor." Sloan stared at him for several seconds. "A joke?" He laughed. "She's cured." Why is she still pretending before I could answer? "Doctor." Sloan spoke. "Do you know how many patients refuse to leave their homes after chemotherapy because they're afraid of exactly this?" Mason's smile faded. She continued, "Do you know how many brides cancel weddings because they're terrified someone will humiliate them?" Nobody answered. "Doctor." Sloane looked around the room. "I've worked in oncology for 202 years. I've watched mothers sleep on hospital floors for months beside their daughters. I've watched fathers shave their own heads. I've watched brothers learn how to clean chemotherapy ports." She looked directly at Mason. "And today, I've watched a brother publicly humiliate a cancer survivor on her wedding day." No one moved, not even the photographers. Mom folded her arms. "Oh, please. She's in remission. Everyone needs to stop treating her like she's fragile." "Doctor," Sloane calmly replied, "remission doesn't erase trauma. Neither does cruelty." Mom rolled her eyes. "The groom deserves honesty." "Doctor," Sloane frowned. "What does that mean?" Mom pointed toward me. "He deserves a real woman, not someone hiding under fake hair." For the first time, Doctor. Sloane looked genuinely angry. She slowly removed the small envelope she had been carrying. "I actually came here to give Claire something." She handed it to me. Inside was my newest scan. Report. Across the top in bold letters, no evidence of disease. Tears filled my eyes. Dr. Sloane smiled. "I wanted you to have this before you walked down the aisle, so today would never again be remembered as your cancer day." She gently squeezed my hand. "It could simply become your wedding day." I hugged her without saying a word. Behind us, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He had heard enough. His expression wasn't shocked. It was heartbreaking. He slowly walked over, picked up my wig, held it in both hands, then turned toward every person in the room. "You know what I see?" Nobody answered. "I see the woman who spent 16 months fighting for her life. I see someone who smiled while sitting through treatments most people couldn't imagine. I see someone who comforted other patients while she was terrified herself." He looked at my mother. "What do you say?" She shrugged. "A disguise." Ethan nodded once. "No, I see courage. You see inconvenience." The room remained silent. One of the makeup artists quietly began crying. A bridesmaid reached for my hand. The photographer lowered his camera. He wasn't interested in staged wedding portraits anymore. He was witnessing something far more important. The wedding coordinator entered the room. "We're ready whenever the bride is." Ethan looked at me. "What do you want to do?" There it was again. The question nobody in my family had ever asked. "What do you want?" I looked into the mirror. My bald head reflected beneath the bridal veil. Then I looked at the wig in Ethan's hands. For years, I'd believed I had to choose hair or confidence, cancer survivor or beautiful bride. That morning, I realized there was another choice. I slowly reached for my wig, held it for a moment, then placed it back inside its box. The room looked confused. I smiled. "I survived cancer. I'm not hiding from photographs." Gasps echoed around the room. My bridesmaids immediately adjusted the veil over my bald head. "Doctor." Sloane wiped away tears. The makeup artist smiled. "You look absolutely stunning." For the first time since treatment began, I believed it. The ceremony started 25 minutes late. When the church doors opened, more than 200 guests turned toward me. I could almost hear the whispers begin. Then something unexpected happened. Nobody stared. Nobody laughed. People smiled. Some quietly cried. A little girl sitting in the second row looked at me. She was wearing a pink baseball cap. She smiled, then slowly removed it. She was bald. Her father gently squeezed her shoulder. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, then gave me a thumbs up. My heart nearly stopped. It felt like Lily had somehow found a way back to me. The ceremony was beautiful. When the minister announced, "You may kiss the bride," the church erupted into applause. For one perfect hour, I forgot everything that had happened. Then the reception began just before dinner. The ballroom lights dimmed. A giant screen behind the dance floor came to life. Mason stood beside the projector smiling. I made a surprise wedding video. I felt a knot form in my stomach. He looked around proudly. "This one's for the groom." The first image appeared on the screen. It wasn't our engagement. It wasn't childhood photos. It was a private picture of me during chemotherapy. Completely bald, vomiting into a hospital basin. Clears throat. Then another and another. Images no one outside my doctors and Ethan had ever seen. The entire ballroom gasped. I slowly turned toward Mason. There was only one question in my mind. How had he gotten those photographs? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The first photograph filled the ballroom screen. I was sitting in an infusion chair with an IV in my arm. My eyes were closed. My head was completely bald. A nurse was adjusting the chemotherapy pump. The second photograph appeared. I was asleep, in a hospital bed. The third, I was vomiting into a basin after treatment. Then another. Then another. Every image had been taken without my knowledge. The room fell completely silent. I looked at Mason. "Where did you get those?" He smirked. "Ethan deserves to know who he really married." I stared at him. "He already does." Mason shrugged. "Now everybody else does too." He actually expected applause. Instead, the only sound came from someone quietly sobbing near table 6. Daniel's mother wasn't crying. She was furious. She stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. "You stole those photographs," Mason laughed. "They were on Mom's old phone." My stomach dropped. Mom's old phone. The one she'd borrowed while driving me to chemotherapy appointments. I remembered asking her to take pictures of me, not because I wanted memories, because I wanted to see how treatment was changing me. I trusted her. She had promised those pictures were private. I slowly turned toward her. "You kept them." She didn't answer. "You showed them to him." Still nothing. Finally, she spoke. "They're family pictures." "No." I answered quietly. "They're medical pictures. You promised nobody would ever see them." She folded her arms. "They're yours. They're also mine." I took them. The ballroom erupted into angry whispers. Ethan walked toward the projector. Without saying a word, he unplugged it. The screen went black. Then he turned around. "Nobody moves." His voice wasn't loud, but every conversation immediately stopped. He looked directly at Mason. "You violated her privacy." He looked at my mother. "You violated her trust." Then he looked around the ballroom, and every single person in this room deserves to know exactly who Claire really is. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "My wife doesn't know I brought this." I looked at him. "What is that?" He smiled. Gently. "Something I've carried since your last treatment." He unfolded the page. It wasn't a speech. It was a letter, one I'd never seen before. He began reading. "The day Claire started chemotherapy, I wrote myself a promise." His hands remained perfectly steady. "If she ever forgets how brave she is, I'll remind her until my last breath." People throughout the ballroom began wiping away tears. He continued, "She apologized for losing her hair. She apologized for getting sick. She apologized for surviving." He looked directly at me. One day, I'm going to spend the rest of my life convincing her. She never needed to apologize for any of it. The room became silent again. Not an uncomfortable silence, a respectful one. Then Ethan folded the paper, walked over to me, knelt down, not because he was proposing, because he wanted everyone to hear him clearly. I laughed through tears. We're already married. I know, but I forgot to ask something. What? He smiled. Will you let me spend the next 50 years proving your family wrong? I couldn't even answer. I simply nodded. The ballroom exploded into applause. Not polite applause. People stood, cheered, some cried openly. The standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute. Mason looked around the room completely confused. His plan had failed. Instead of humiliating me, he had united every person in that ballroom against him. Then something happened that none of us expected. The banquet manager hurried toward Ethan. He whispered something into his ear. Ethan's expression immediately changed. What? The manager repeated himself quietly. Ethan looked at me. The hotel's legal director is here. I frowned. Why? The manager answered instead. Because several guests recognized those hospital photographs. What about them? He took a careful breath. The hospital logo and patient information were still visible in the images. I felt my stomach tighten. The photographs weren't just embarrassing. They displayed parts of confidential medical records. The manager continued, one of our guests is the hospital's chief privacy officer. He recognized them immediately. He says there are serious questions about how those private medical images left the hospital. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward my mother. She suddenly looked terrified. Not embarrassed, terrified. Because for the first time that day, this wasn't just a family argument anymore. It had become a question of how intensely personal medical photographs had been copied, kept, and publicly displayed without my permission. The chief privacy officer stepped into the ballroom. He looked directly at my mother, then calmly asked, Mrs. Donovan, would you please tell me how you obtained and distributed these photographs? No one answered. My mother stared at the floor. The hospital's chief privacy officer, Michael Hayes, remained calm. He wasn't interested in embarrassing anyone. He wanted one answer. Mrs. Donovan, those photographs contained confidential treatment information. How did they leave the hospital? Mom finally looked up. I took them. Mr. Hayes is nodded with Claire's permission. Silence. No. Were you authorized to share them publicly? No. Were you authorized to copy them again? No. Every guest understood exactly what that meant. The ballroom had gone from uncomfortable to horrified. Mason suddenly interrupted. Mom never made the slideshow. Everyone turned toward him. I did. He pointed toward himself. I found the pictures on her old laptop. I thought it'd be funny. Mr. Hayes looked directly at him. Did Claire ever give you permission to access those images? No. Did she give permission for you to project them to 200 wedding guests? No. He quietly closed his notebook. Thank you. For the first time all day, my father stood up. He looked exhausted, older, smaller. He faced the room, then looked at me. I knew about the slideshow. My heart broke all over again. You knew? He nodded. I thought it would finally force you to stop wearing the wig. You agreed with them. He couldn't finish. He lowered his head. I kept choosing the easy side. That sentence hurt more than shouting ever could. Not because it excused anything. Because it explained everything. My father had spent 30 years watching cruelty and calling it peace. Ethan quietly stepped beside me. You don't have to answer anyone today. I smiled. No, I think I finally do. I walked to the center of the ballroom. Not quickly, not dramatically, just calmly. For years, I had imagined standing in front of my family and telling them exactly how much they had hurt me. Now that moment had finally arrived. Strangely, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. I looked first at Maine. You've spent your whole life making people laugh. He nodded slowly, but you never noticed. You were only funny when someone else was crying. His face collapsed. Then I turned toward my father. You taught me something. He looked up hopefully. You taught me that silence protects the wrong people. He immediately began crying. Finally, I faced my mother. She couldn't even look at me. I spent years wondering why I was never enough. I took a slow breath. I finally understand. It had nothing to do with me. You were embarrassed by illness. You confused appearance with value. You loved the version of me that made you look comfortable. But the moment I needed a mother, you chose an audience. Nobody in the ballroom moved. Not one person. Then I did something nobody expected. I removed my veil completely. My bald head reflected beneath the lights. I looked around the ballroom. My name is Claire Donovan. I survived cancer. I survived chemotherapy, and today I survived my own family. The guests stood one by one. No. One had asked them to. The applause started near the back of the ballroom, then spread across every table. Not because I had cancer, because I had stopped hiding. While everyone was standing, my wedding planner quietly walked toward the DJ. She handed him a small flash drive. He looked confused. She smiled. Claire asked me to keep this safe. I frowned. What? She smiled back at me. You gave it to me 3 weeks ago. Then I remembered. The day after I overheard my mother call me a bald ghost. I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to spend my wedding waiting to be humiliated. I had quietly prepared for the possibility that something would happen. Not to take revenge. To protect the truth. The screen behind us came alive again. This time not with hospital photographs, with dozens of home videos, old recordings I'd transferred from family tapes. The first clip showed me at 8 years old. Completely healthy, running across the backyard, my grandmother laughing behind the camera. The next clip, my mother brushing my hair before school, smiling, telling me I was beautiful. Another, dad teaching me to ride a bicycle. Another, Christmas morning. Another, my 10th birthday. The room watched quietly. Then the final recording began. It had been recorded accidentally on my mother's phone 3 weeks before the wedding. She didn't know the voice recorder was still running after she'd placed it inside her purse. The ballroom heard my mother's unmistakable voice. If he sees her bald, maybe he'll cancel the wedding himself. Then Mason laughed. Or I'll make sure everybody sees. Another voice. My father. We should stop. My mother answered immediately. No. Maybe this is the only way he'll realize she isn't good enough. The recording ended. Nobody said a word. Not because they were shocked. Because no explanation was possible. The truth had spoken for itself. My mother slowly looked around. The ballroom. Every guest, every relative, every friend. No one met her eyes. No one defended her. No one applauded her. For the first time in her life, there was no audience left. Only consequences. Then Aunt Evelyn quietly stood. She looked at my mother and father. Then said one sentence. You didn't lose your daughter today. You buried your place in her life with your own hands. The ballroom remained silent. Outside, the wedding bells began ringing. But inside, everyone knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the life my family would never again be allowed to control. The applause lasted almost 2 minutes, not because I had exposed my family, because every person in that ballroom had finally seen the difference between appearance and character. When the room became quiet again, I looked at Ethan. He smiled. "What happens now?" I smiled back. "Now what?" "Celebrate our wedding." For the first time all day, people laughed. Real laughter. The kind that heals instead of hurting. The band started playing again. Dinner was finally served. Children returned to the dance floor. The reception continued, not because everyone ignored what had happened, because nobody was going to let cruelty steal another minute from our marriage. 3 months later, the consequences arrived. Not all at once, one decision at a time. The state licensing board completed its investigation after reviewing evidence of my father's financial misconduct and forged documents that had surfaced during the wedding. His contractor's license was revoked. The construction company closed. Several longtime clients canceled ongoing contracts, not because I called them, because public records told the truth. My mother's role in the community changed just as dramatically. She resigned from every volunteer position she held. Not after a public argument, after parents quietly stopped trusting her. The church leadership asked her to step away while they reviewed complaints about her conduct toward vulnerable people. No speeches, no public humiliation, just the natural result of years of choices. Mason lost the promotion he had been celebrating for months. His employer had learned about the wedding after several guests submitted formal complaints regarding his conduct and the unauthorized public display of another person's private medical photographs. The company concluded that his actions violated its professional standards. He wasn't fired because he embarrassed me. He lost the position because his own actions showed a serious lack of judgment. For the first time in his life, there was no one left to blame. Almost a year passed. Then one rainy afternoon, my assistant entered my office. "Claire, there's someone here." "Ooh," she hesitated. "Your mother." I looked through the glass wall. He looked smaller, older. The confidence she'd carried her entire life had disappeared. I walked into the reception area. She stood immediately. "I won't keep you long." I didn't invite her to sit. She held out a small box. "I found these." Inside were dozens of photographs. Every childhood picture she'd hidden from me over the years. Birthday parties, school plays, camping trips with grandma. Christmas mornings, pictures I had believed were lost forever. "I should have given these to you years ago." I looked at her. "Why now?" She answered honestly. "Because they're yours." There was no excuse, no attempt to justify anything, only silence. Then, she whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know. I only wanted you to have what always belonged to you." I closed the box. "Thank you." She looked surprised. "That's all." I nodded. "That's all." She waited, probably expecting a hug, an invitation. Another chance instead. I quietly stood. "There is one thing I want you to understand." She nodded. "I'm listening." I took a slow breath. "You didn't lose me because of cancer. You didn't lose me because of my wig. You lost me every single time you laughed, while someone else humiliated me." Tears rolled down her face. "I know." "No," I answered gently. "I don't think you do. Because if you truly understood, you would never ask me to carry a regret." Silence filled the room. She lowered her head. "I'm sorry." For the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. But some apologies arrive after the bridge has already collapsed. I smiled politely. I hope you find peace. She nodded once, then quietly walked away. That was the last time I ever saw my mother. 5 years later, Ethan and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. The same ballroom invited us back after its complete renovation. The manager remembered us immediately. "We've been hoping you'd return." That evening, something unexpected happened. A young bride approached me. She wore no hair, no wig, just a sparkling veil. She smiled nervously. "I wanted to thank you." I looked confused. "For what?" She laughed. "My oncologist showed me your interview years ago. I was going to cancel my wedding." Instead, she touched her veil. I walked down the aisle exactly like this. Tears filled my eyes. She hugged me. "You gave me my courage back." As she walked away, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You hear that?" I smiled. "What?" "The people who tried to make you ashamed ended up making thousands of women feel brave." That night, as we danced beneath the same chandeliers where my brother had tried to destroy my dignity, I realized something. People always ask if I ruined my family. I didn't. I never exposed a lie that wasn't already true. I never forced them to make cruel choices. I never taught them to mock illness. I never made them humiliate their own daughter. They built that, ending themselves. I simply stopped protecting them from it. My brother thought ripping off my wig would reveal my greatest weakness. Instead, it revealed his. And while he spent the rest of his life trying to explain one terrible decision, I spent mine helping. Other women believe that surviving cancer never made them less beautiful. My mother once laughed and said, "The groom deserves a real woman." She was right about one thing. He did. That's exactly who he